Yo, what's going on today, world? Today I'm gonna be solo dolo, but we still gonna welcome you to the show. This is Double D's. Let's talk about it. The sports podcast that talks about all the hot topics. We continue touching on the NFL Combine with day two. I will be joined by a special guest, Steve Benard, a little later. But I wanted to touch a little bit on what we saw yesterday. I saw a little bit of the corners, the DBs, the safeties, and the tight ends. Man, we could go ahead and get started just talking about some of the blazing 40 times that we got from the corners. Preferably Nate Wiggins showed out with a 4.2840. Quinion Mitchell is another name that you could throw out there at 4.33. Um, they all had good verticals and good broad jump times. We had some underwhelming performances also at the combine that I'm pretty sure will probably be made up in their pro days. Um, but we'll touch on those later. As you see, I have my Florida State hoodie on, so I am a Florida State fan, but I am not biased when it comes to breaking down every prospect or those who intrigue or may slip under the radar. Some other names, of course, your top rated cornerbacks going into this draft: Kool-Aid McKinstry, who did not is not performing at the combine right now, but his partner is Tyrion Arnold, who also had a very strong day. Um, as we get into it, we can continue to talk and touch on the safeties. In my opinion, I don't think this is a very strong safety class this year. You may get some eventual starters, definitely, because the combine does not dictate everything. But as far as just performances, overall, I don't think it's a very strong group. Um, you may have something that's a surprise down the line. The projected safety that many think would be a first rounder, Cam Kitchens, he kind of underwhelmed, and I will go ahead and touch on that now. The Miami safety Cam Kitchens, his 40 time and his broad jump were underwhelming to say the least. His partner James Williams also underperformed, but I think that's due to him being a tweener. One, two, he also just seems to need to find his position because he's a tweener. At the Senior Bowl, I understand that he did test as a linebacker, but he chose to test as a safety and participate with the safeties in Indianapolis. Um, in my opinion, I think he needs to either move to linebacker or see about maybe being a 3-4 edge because he is 6'4", 231. That was his measurements as far as his height and weight. I would say you could probably put another 10 pounds on him, 10, 15 pounds, and have him in a specialist situation role of rushing the passer or playing that way. It keeps him in the box and he can cover in the flats and the short areas within the zone scheme. But family, I just really am intrigued going back to the corners. Oh, better yet, we'll stay with the safeties because it is one particular safety that I am interested in looking at. It's Evan Williams, one from Oregon, and then you had, of course, Javon Bullitt of Georgia. Their 40 times was strong at the safety position because they ran 4.4 in the 40. Um, it was there another name that I had. I believe it was, oh yeah, Tyke Smith of Georgia, also and Millard Bradford. Um, those are some names that I'm interested in keeping an eye on going down the road. But as we shift to the corners, I believe it was Tyler Newton was another name out of Minnesota. But family, as we touch in, we go back to the corners. Quinion Mitchell is a name that's interesting to me. Um, Coming out of Toledo, uh, which is a smaller school in the either the Ohio Valley or the MAC, either one. Um, he's 6 foot 195. He tested well and I see him as a strong starter. Uh, Transition into whatever team gets him. He is probably your fourth best or fifth best corner prospect in the draft right now, behind Kool Aid, Tyrion, and Nate. Those would I say be Nate Wiggins of Clemson. I say those would be your top three corners with Quinion Mitchell stepping in and touching. But once we get into it with our guest who has boots on the ground, he'll be able to tell us a little bit more about what he saw. Um, of course, my partner D, he was not able to make it today, so we're just going to do a short segment here and just touch on day two. We can transition and go into the discussing the tight ends today. A couple of names I'll throw out there, of course, Jaheim Bell, me being an FSU fan, as I'm looking here. Another one is Jatavian Sanders, who may be an interesting prospect, but a little bit more can be given on talked about with him. Ben Sanat is another name that I'm very, very interested in. I was interested in before the combine. I think he could be a strong performer. A name that actually also intrigues me too. I don't know about his production at Illinois. I have to go and check on that again. But Tip Ryman of Illinois tested very well. And so that's one of the questions that I would ask of him. Is it just his athleticism and combine results? And how do you compare that with and the tape and the production from the position of tight end? But man, Jaheim Bell really pretty much showed out. He's a bit undersized himself at 6'2", 240. So he's a tweener. He could be a move tight end. You can do a little bit of everything with him. Swiss Army knife. I know at his time in South Carolina and even at Florida State, there were some things that they did with him, moving him around, also allowing him to be in the backfield. He could be a wildcat specialist and short yardage goal line. He has the ability to be a little shifty and break tackles. He ran a 4.6 at his on his 40. So that showed well for him. His vertical was strong also. Yes, he had 35-inch vertical, which put him as far as tight ends in this particular class. He finished fifth as far as his vertical, a tie for fourth actually. Um, I'm very intrigued on some of these other tight ends and prospects though. But as we prepare for our guest when he comes in, we'll elaborate a little bit more.
Sean, what's up, man?
How you doing this morning?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm good. I'm sorry I was on the other link sitting around like an idiot. Didn't even,
That's all right, man. That's my fault because I don't think I told you when I sent the link that I had to send another one because I had a little issue with the room that I was in. But
yep,
we just tapping in real quick, man. Don't want to waste a lot of your time. Maybe give me about
yep,
20 tops.
sure,
Um, just give it. D's not gonna be available today. He had some family things he had to take care of.
sure.
But I just wanted to touch in on the DBs, man. First of all, and what did you see with the performances yesterday? We know we had some underwhelming and some surprising performances. I want to start off with Nate Wiggins. What did you see out of his performance? I know his 40 time was the strongest in the combine, but I didn't see any other drills. Did he run any other drills? He just ran his 40.
It's a great start to the show. I'm gonna definitely go back to our last conversation and clip that part, and then clip his 40, and then definitely post that. I said he was the best DB in the draft. I'm gonna stand by it. Not only did he run the 40 in a blazing time, the crowd knew it. As soon as he ran it from the inside of the stadium, you can't see the exact time. You can see it on NFL Network, but we
Mhm,
can't see the exact time on the first run. On the second run, it'll post the first time, and then it'll show his second time in real time. So when he ran it, the crowd went crazy, and I kind of looked off to the side like, yeah, I guess that did kind of look fast. And then about 10 seconds later, the crowd got even louder because they saw the time on their phones and things like that on the app. You can see him walking through midfield. He had like a certain bop to him. Like, yeah, I know I did that. From the 50 to about the 40-yard line, he just grabbed his leg. And I immediately just pointed at James and just started laughing. I said, yeah, he got that. He got that baseball signal, man. Get him out of there. So, when the news came out on Twitter that he felt something pop, I'm laughing because I'm looking at him, and then the cameraman pans over to him. He has a bag of ice on the top of his quad. He has his legs stretched out. He's sitting with his arms stretched out on the bench, and he's laughing on the phone with whoever. I'm like, yeah. Um,
Shut it
the-
down,
Shut
right?
it down. The interesting part about it is when he had his media day, Jarian and Renardo were at the same time, I believe. So I couldn't interview him at all. I had to get those guys. Um, but Jarian finished a little bit early, and he was on the way to Renardo, so I stopped, snapped some pictures, stuff like that, and I was able to listen to a couple of things he was saying. And obviously, the big clip that everybody's talking about, somebody said that you look like you might run a 4.5. How do you feel about your speed? And then he answered kind of defensively, like, I don't know what kind of film you're watching. I don't know who told you that. And he follows it with that performance. So, um, he was the talk of the draft. The film backs it up. Nate Wiggins is legit, and he's also helped by the slow performance of who you named. Who you hadn't named yet, Terry Arnold.
Yeah.
4.51, 4.55, 40. Struggled in the beginning of some of his drills in terms of getting out of his break. He was kind of getting stuck on his break and taking an extra step. Now he doesn't do that on film. He was the second DB to perform the 40. I can only imagine, man. Bright lights, people around. He was probably nervous, but 4.51, 4.55 is going to have to do better on his pro day for that, for sure.
Yeah. I'll throw out another name then at the position. Quinion Mitchell, who I think had the second fastest 40 time. Um,
Yep.
he's intrigues me because he's coming from a smaller school in Toledo, so he's one that jumps up the draft boards. Would you see him as probably as far as prospects, maybe the fourth best corner, or maybe the fourth corner taken off the board, possibly?
I think he's the third corner taken off the board.
Okay.
Um, yeah, man. He did go to Toledo. He's from a small town in Florida, Williston.
Hmm.
He's listed at 6 feet. He looks like he's bigger than that. He's
Hmm.
also listed at 195. He looks like he's probably 200 pounds. Like we mentioned before in the previous show, seeing him in the Senior Bowl, he took on everybody and had no challenges at all. He handled everybody. He's extremely and that's just something at the end of the day that the NFL is looking for: size, speed, and confidence. Um, he was kind of the alpha dog once Nate sat down. In all the
Hmm.
drills, he performed well in terms of backpedaling, turning, flipping hips, high pointing the ball. He didn't drop any balls. He did his thing. I think he's the third corner. I think Nate is going to jump Terrian,
Hmm.
just based on teams continuing to evaluate the film, and also Nate being 20 years old. That's going to be that's another thing he mentioned during the interview that I hadn't even noticed. He's the youngest player in his position group.
Okay.
Um, so him being 20 years old, Terrian I think is going to rebound, have a strong pro day. He'll be the second DB taken, and I think Quinyon is going to jump Kool-Aid McKinstry at this point,
Okay.
who didn't work out because of the Jones fracture in his foot.
Yeah. Okay. One more question on the corners. Were there any corners that helped themselves a lot that may be under the radar as far as uh, their draft status? Going into the mock drafts and things of that. Is anybody that helped themselves yesterday?
Yeah, I think of two guys specifically, and it's kind of unorthodox in the way that I'm going to kind of mention this because one helped himself in a very sly way.
Hmm.
The other one helped himself by just being a flat out physical freak, right? So I'll start off the guy that did it in a very sly way. Um, Product of Miami, Florida, Carroll City to be specific, former FSU Seminole, uh, also former Louisville Cardinal, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. Um, he didn't perform. He opted out of the 40, but he did every other drill and he killed it. The cool thing about it is he was the corner following Arnold, so kind of seeing the contrast between the two was interesting. He is not as quick, not as twitchy, but I think he's going to have success in the league based on some traits. He gets in and out of his break as smooth as possible. I think if he wasn't as smooth with his footwork, then he wouldn't be a top tier prospect because he doesn't have the top end speed as a Nate Wiggins or a Daquan Hardy or guys like that. But what I will say is having lunch with an assistant GM, NFL assistant GM yesterday here in Indianapolis, they said they really like him, which I found very interesting. They said they really, really like him. They see him more as a nickel, more than an outside corner. He played outside almost exclusively at Florida State and Louisville, but they see him as a nickel. He doesn't have extreme measurables. He's teetering around 5'11". He's not the biggest guy, but he's very strong. Loves to tackle. and is extremely confident. So the assistant GM saying that they really like him was interesting, and he also someone who boosted his stock coming back from the Senior Bowl. Now the other guy who really made a lot of money yesterday, who really, I mean, it was one of the freaks of the whole draft. This far the process, we're talking about Daquan Hardy, corner, Penn State. At the end of the day, his numbers are insane. I mean, 4.38, 40-yard dash, 1.5 split, 10.6 broad jump. I mean, this kid knocked it out of the park. I don't know if him and Chop Robinson have the same representation and workout partners, but these guys are really handling business now. I didn't know much about him during the season. I know that Penn State had the number one ranked defense in the country, coached by Manny Diaz, now Duke head coach. But I didn't know that these guys had these sort of athletes there. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting. It makes me look at them even in a different lens, knowing that they're not competing and beating the Michigans and Penn States of the world, and they have freaks all across the board.
Yeah. Okay. We're gonna shift over to the safety position real quick. Now, in my personal opinion, I think it was a bit underwhelming in certain for as a group this year for safeties. It doesn't stand out, especially when the projected number one safety really didn't perform well yesterday, and that's Cam Kitchens. He was one of the names that were thrown out as a possible first round at that position. His 40 was bad. His broad was bad for his position. Um, I will ask you the same question I asked about the corners. Who stood out the most from what you saw on site?
Um, I have a couple guys. I'd say maybe 1A, 1B. Um, Javon Bullard, safety from University of Georgia. Extremely physical guy on film. I see that during his training since the offseason, since the Orange Bowl. He's really polished up on some things. Ran a good time, 4.47 40. A little smaller than I thought. He looks bigger to me on in pads.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't know he was 5'10". I figured he'd be at least 6 feet tall. But at the end of the day, who cares, right?
Yeah.
He's definitely one of the top prospects. I'm looking at him probably as a day two, maybe early day three.
Okay.
The issue is he's got kind of average burst, and that could end up hurting him. There's some fast guys in this league in the NFL, as you know.
Hmm.
Um, if it's in a short box, if it's in a phone booth, he's going to accelerate through the tackle. But if you're able to get behind him, even though he did run a 4.47, I do have some questions on what that's going to kind of look like.
Hmm.
He did on-field drills, but he didn't do any sort of vertical, any broad jump, three cone. He didn't do any of that stuff. Um, he graded out well. I mean, safety rank wise, based on the numbers, he was the top guy. Now, another safety that I didn't really know anything about that really kind of stood out to me was Cole Bishop out of Utah. Um,
Yes.
I just from watching him, even based on his workouts, I can
Hmm.
tell this guy's a serious guy. I went back to my hotel and looked at some of his film. I think this is a guy that's going to give you value in a dime package in the NFL. I think this is someone who's going to be able to stand out on special teams for you. Um, Looks like he's a heady player, smart guy. He came in and ran a 4.45
Hmm.
out the gate. Didn't know he was from Atlanta, Georgia as well. I found that interesting. Guys coming from Atlanta, going all the way over there. Um, but based on his film, I really like him, and I think he really stood out in a somewhat underwhelming safety class, like you mentioned.
Okay. Well, we're gonna shift over to the next position, and it's tight end. And I'm gonna go ahead and be the homer and start because I think our boy Jaheim really performed well. At his size, that's the only question that you really do have about him, at being 6'2", 240. But his 40 time for that, it wasn't bad. It was about average, but for the tight ends that were there, he ran on par. But he really showed his ability to consistently catch the ball and run his routes. And he seemed very smooth, looked like he got over whatever injury he had during the season to prepare for this. Which, once again, it kind of validates what we talk about offline as far as those guys opting out and, really need to get healthy to put themselves in the best position to move on to the next level of the career. But is there any other tight end? It was another one from Kansas State that I was interested in that performed well. Sanat, Ben Sanat. What are your opinions on him?
So not as solid. I got a chance to see him at the Senior Bowl. The size is there, the measurables is there. A really physical run blocker, which is going to help. Um, his vert is what really threw me off. I mean, his kid's got a 40-inch vert, 6.82 in the three cone, 159 on the split, 468 on the 40. He checked out all the boxes. Teams really liked him um, at the Senior Bowl.
Hmm.
So this is somebody who I think is going to get drafted. Um, honestly, he might have made himself some money yesterday because when we talk about tight ends, obviously the talk of the town is Brock Bowers.
Hmm.
Um, Value wise, he's probably a top 10 prospect in his draft. He'll probably go top 15. And outside of that, I mean, who's the best tight end after that, right? If we're
Yeah.
talking about pass catching versatility, it's going to be Jaheim Bell, right? He's got
Yes.
the confidence, and then if he falls into the right offense, I was very curious about hearing some of the teams that he did meet with. He did meet with the Eagles. He did meet with the Chiefs. He did with me. He hasn't met with the Niners yet formally, but he did meet with them informally. He also met with the Baltimore Ravens. So very interesting on some of the teams that are looking at him. Outside of him, Sanat. I mean, he's got the size.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see guys you can't really fall in love with the college numbers because some offenses don't really tailor over to the tight end. This isn't a guy who had 80 catches or anything like that at Kansas State, but he was really productive and he looks the part and he's delivering. Now another guy that I think made himself some money was Theo Johnson out of Penn State. Now he's probably the most physically imposing tight end here. I remember seeing him at the Senior Bowl and was like, "Damn, this guy looks like a dude." Um,
Whew.
he's just
Yeah.
massive.
Six
Um,
six.
he probably looks 6'8", and that's
Yeah.
probably because he was in pads. Um, Almost a 40-inch vertical, 4.57. These are elite numbers. I think I read a stat prior to this conversation because I figured we were going to have some talks in regards to the tight end. Out of the last, I think since 1987, based on measurables and the total score, he's the number one tight end ever ranked.
Wow.
So athleticism wise, the next gen stats have him ranked as the second most athletic tight end um, um, in this particular draft. But I don't see anybody this big doing some of the things that he's doing. I mean, 6'6" and a 1/8 and 260.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, this is a guy. He kind of struggled in some of the run blocking, locking out. He was locking out his arms. He wasn't necessarily driving his feet all the time. And so obviously, some of these defensive ends are pretty strong. But I think if he cleans up that technique, he's going to be a great value pick for somebody in the NFL. Absolutely.
Okay. I asked on one more tight end, or actually two.
Mhm.
This was a name I saw on social media. I guess someone was trolling from Illinois, but Tip Ryman. He tested really well too for the position. What is your opinion on him as a prospect?
Drills came out clean. Um, Comes in and out of his breaks really well. Um, some of these guys, you can tell they kind of hesitate when the ball comes towards him. He trusts his hands, real soft hands,
Mhm.
really clean route runner. Um, I mean, to be honest, he didn't get a lot of attention at Illinois based on their season. But I think honestly, 1,000%, he's one of the top guys. In my opinion, he's one of the top five tight ends that made himself some money yesterday. There's some guys that really underwhelmed, but in terms of guys that really showed up, handled their business, did great in interviews as well. From what I saw, I think he's going to be a great value pick. Also, someone with some sort of special teams ability. He said he also played defense in high school, so
Mhm.
he's got that sort of mentality, that sort of toughness that you need in a tight end. But there's some guys that underwhelm, man. Jatavian Sanders, man.
That was a name I was going to ask next because that was one that myself and D were looking at as possibly really helping themselves this week, and they did. He did.
He did not. He did
No.
not. To be honest, when it came to the tight ends,
Mhm.
obviously Brock was in his own lane, but outside of him, he's the one who had the most media presence here. A lot of folks were interested in seeing how he was doing. He had a great season. Obviously, he was a big part of that Texas offense, but he looked good. I mean, physically, he looks well, but I don't know. Sometimes these lights get bright for some guys, and
Mhm.
they just don't perform. The numbers were underwhelming at best. Basically, a 4.740. That doesn't he doesn't play like a 4.740 guy on film. So I'm sure he's looking forward to his pro day for the opportunity to kind of be able to tighten some things up and improve on some of these numbers.
Okay, Steve. Well, lastly, man, we're just gonna move into looking forward to today. What are you looking forward with the most today? Because this is one of the show days here. This
No,
is
I
the
mean,
show day.
this is the show day. This is the day
Yeah.
that everybody comes in for. I was telling Big Game. Obviously, I love how the NFL sets it up. If you had quarterbacks, running backs, and receivers going day one, and then you followed it the other way, you wouldn't have anybody here till the weekend.
Yeah.
No disrespect to the offensive lineman or defensive lineman, but this is the most exciting part of it.
Yeah.
So there's several guys that I'm looking forward to seeing.
Mhm.
Obviously, not just being a homer, I want to see what Keon Coleman runs, but I want to see if all these guys compete. Unfortunately, at this stage, when you have these mock drafts and these conversations that occur, it's pretty much a done deal that the top three picks are going to be quarterbacks, which I believe is the first time in NFL history, right?
Mhm.
So those guys aren't throwing. They're set in there and they're just going to hang out and enjoy the show in their sweatpants, given provided by Noble and all the other sponsors that are here, right?
Mhm.
But these receivers really have an opportunity to show, even if you might not have the top end quarterbacks that are throwing, what they can do. I want to see how competitive these guys are. You're looking at there's some mocks that have 5 to 6 receivers coming out in the first round. So what's going to be the differentiator between Roma Dunze, between Neighbors, between Keon Coleman, between guys like that?
Mhm.
There's also some guys lower rounds that I really like. Like I mentioned, Javon Baker out
Mhm.
of UCF is a guy that I'm really curious to see. There's one guy you're probably familiar with him that was mocked really high beginning in the season. He
Mhm.
had some issues gaining eligibility, and then he was given his eligibility at North Carolina. A guy by the name of Tez Walker,
Yes. Yes.
predicted to go first round early.
Mhm.
He's a guy who transferred from a smaller school, a MAC school, and
Mhm.
dominated. And he did terrible in the Senior Bowl. Nobody dropped more footballs than Tez Walker during the Senior Bowl. In terms of separation at the top of his route,
Mhm.
he's elite. Um, in terms of trusting his hands, he's not. He needs to really focus on bringing the ball in. He's been falling uh, really, really fast in mock drafts since the Mobile Senior Bowl. So he needs to be able to perform today. I wish there was a one-on-one scenario. There
Mhm.
isn't. Maybe one day the NFL Combine will change that, but we'll have one-on-ones right away. I think that'd be really exciting. I'm more interested in seeing one-on-ones in some of these drills that some of these guys do. But Tez Walker, Javon Baker, these are guys that I really need to see what they have going on because at the end of the day, who knows? Ricky Pearsall, I think he's going to test really well. Ricky can get in that 3 or 4 range. I think he stays in that 4 or 5 range or whatever. Uh, then I think he's going to be mostly a special teams guy. Maybe, I mean, I had an executive tell me he's a third-round pick. I probably think he's a top 3 guy. And then Johnny Wilson, right? He was
Mhm.
super confident when he was going to run. So I want to see if he can make himself some money today as well.
Okay, I'll throw out a few more names that I would like you to keep an eye on. Of course, Lad McConkey. You got to touch on Lad. Jamari Thrash. That's another name from Louisville that I'm familiar with, that I'm interested in seeing. Xavier Weaver from Colorado. He was very productive in his time there. And then it was one more name other than Lad. From South Carolina, Xavier Leggett. Those are some names that may be under the radar. And then the kid from Virginia. I can't because he was very productive on that team. What's his name? Is it Washington?
Yeah,
I'm
Washington.
trying to, yeah, Washington.
Hmm.
Those are some names that if you could just keep an eye out and we'll touch base about that,
Yeah. Yeah, we
just
could
to
touch
check
base tomorrow or whatever. I mean,
in. Yeah.
to be honest, the guys that you named are really good players. To be honest, I'm really curious to see what some of these guys run.
Hmm.
Um, Leggett, I mean, Leggett has elite film. He was probably one of the top 5 receivers in the country this year, just based on the film. On a team that really wasn't that good, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'd love to see what he can do. There's some other receivers that are also under the radar that I just kind of saw in passing. But I'm
Hmm.
more than happy to kind of touch base on that as
Okay.
well, and we'll see what we can go, man. But honestly, it's the best day. I'm really excited to see some of these quarterbacks as well. I want to see Spencer Rattler spin it. I want to see some of
Yeah.
these other guys try to elevate their stock. I want to see what Bo Nix can do.
Yeah.
And I want to see if JJ McCarthy is going to perform. I think he's getting a lot of hype, and he's one of those guys who could probably take advantage of the top 3 quarterbacks not throwing and not participating in certain drills.
Okay. Not to put you on the spot here because I know we were discussing some things in the space and I heard you talk, but because of the JJ McCarthy hype, do you think that it's coming off the heels of no one wants to miss out on Tom Brady again? You know,
Absolutely,
you know how that works.
absolutely.
No one wants to be the one to miss on a Tom Brady or even a Brock Purdy at this point. So he's kind of he's kind of earning or getting that extra special attention because no one wants to be the GM or the scout that hey we missed on a Hall of Famer here or we missed on an All Pro quarterback just by looking at. But when you look at the college film, I know it was discussed last night that he does have some things. His cerebral is on a high level and he processes information. But you can process all the information you want, but if your arm talent still isn't there, I don't see it. But then the potential to be at least an average in the right system, the average quarterback to a productive quarterback, I think he could be that. But what they're projecting him to be, I don't see it. I don't see him being an elite level game changing quarterback. I see you put him in a good system that has a lot of talent around him, just like where he was at Michigan. I think he can excel and be a good solid starter. But I don't think he's anything beyond that.
Absolutely. I mean, the stuff you're talking about is true, but I mean, the Purdy's and the Brady's of the world were all drafted late.
Yeah.
Why is this kid being mocked in the first round? Well, what are his numbers against the elite defenses? What were his numbers against Penn State? What was his numbers against Ohio State? What was his number in the playoffs?
Against
It's just
Iowa.
not impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, against Iowa. Like that's the thing about it. It's like we understand projections, we understand what some of these people see behind the scenes, but at the end of the day, top half of the first round. I don't understand it. I know he's more athletic than he gives off. He's
Mhm.
definitely an athletic kid, but um, I don't know, man. I think obviously the NFL is shifting towards an offense important model. Defense is almost a afterthought, and we just want to score as many points as possible. But I've never seen mediocre quarterbacks at college level all of a sudden turn the league on fire. Maybe there's a couple, but there's not really a lot that happens. So the teams he's being mocked to aren't even teams that are described from what you said. A team with a solid system, a great defense, a great running game. When you're
Mhm.
going to the top half of that draft, these are teams that didn't have that. Now, if you're being drafted to Buffalo or if you're being drafted to Kansas City or something like that, then that makes sense because they have the things that you're talking about. But when you step in today as a first round pick as a quarterback, you're supposed to be a franchise changer. You're supposed to be a multi-time Pro Bowler. You're supposed to be someone that's there for 10 to 15 years. If you can't get that, um, it's going to push the franchise back, and that builds resentment between the fan base and that player. We talk about Daniel Jones, New York
Mhm.
Giants. What did they see? Daniel Jones to this day. How long has it been? 5 years? I don't see it.
Yes. Yeah. You seen it in New York with the Jets. The same thing. Turned out. What's his name?
Zach Wilson.
Zach Wilson. Workout warrior. Showed well in his drills. All of his pro day, and it seems to not be. It's not manifesting itself on the field because they wouldn't have had to go trade for Aaron Rodgers at this point.
Well, these are the things that make us fans. These are the things that have us addicted to the combine, that have us watching every year. It's not an exact science. I mean, I've been watching the combine every year since the year 2000. I believe I was in fifth or sixth grade at that point. I remember Brian Urlacher was the first one that I watched. Like guys were talking about, he made himself some money coming from a smaller school. But to be honest, man, when we're specifically talking about the quarterback position, we're talking to Kyle Bowlers. We're talking to
Yeah.
JP Lossmans. We're talking about the Jake Lockers. We're talking to Jamarcus Russells. We're talking
Yes.
all these guys that are workout warriors that never lived up to the bill.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know if we're seeing a lot less now. I think the NFL has become simpler because it's adapting some of the systems that these guys use in college to have the numbers hide weaknesses in certain things. Now, every once in a while, you're going to have an elite guy like a CJ Stroud that burns the league on fire right away.
Mhm.
Quick motion on that. I spoke to a Texan scout um, who told me when CJ Stroud got drafted and went into OTAs and minicamp, he was throwing interceptions left and right. And I'm not just talking about interceptions to a guy like Derek Stingley Jr., who's their top corner. I'm talking about interceptions to undrafted guys, fringe
Mhm.
guys, special teams guys, throwing picks left and right. So what the Texans ended up doing that really helped CJ Stroud, and I hope other teams will be able to adopt this. They entered a clock. They literally had a clock in his helmet that would ring off before 3 seconds to let him know this is the time that you have to get the ball. And every week, considerably, he was able to get rid of the ball and be able to make decisions quicker. Um, this is a guy who came into a system with veteran receivers. He had young guys, young receivers, and he balled out because of the adjustments that they made during minicamp and OTAs. And I hope some of these teams can do that. But there's some teams that you can put a clock in a helmet, and it's not going to help these guys, man. They can't read defenses fast enough. They were just part of a good team, and that's what I think JJ McCaffrey is. JJ McCarthy.
Jay
Sorry.
McCarthy. All right. And before we close, our last question before I let you go, man. I have one more. Our man JT. I know he interviewed well. What are some of the teams that have interviewed him, and do you potentially see him probably getting, because he's not going to be able to throw right now, getting drafted maybe in the latter rounds due to the injury and not being able to perform? What are some of the teams that have interviewed him?
There's several teams that he's met with formally. Uh, he's met with a lot of teams informally. He's probably met with about 20 teams formally.
Hmm.
Um, but sometimes, man, the devil's in the details. You got to listen to somebody speak, and they'll give you what you're looking for.
Okay.
Um, a lot of I know he spoke with the Bucks. He spoke with some teams that I was cool, but he kept mentioning Pittsburgh and he kept mentioning Dallas, even to the point where there was questions that were completely away from that were asking receivers that he would love to play with. He named George Pickens. He named CeeDee Lamb. He just kept going to those teams, which I find really, 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 really interesting. Um, Obviously, if Dallas would have drafted a guy like that and replace Dak with literally have the same story happen a decade later, that'd be kind of funny,
Yeah.
to be honest with you. But Pittsburgh is a team that I think he'd be a great fit for,
Yeah.
um, a team that he'd be able to battle at the end of the day. I mean, unless Pittsburgh makes a blockbuster trade for a major quarterback, even if they get a guy like a Russell Wilson, why wouldn't you get a guy like JT, right?
Yeah.
You know who Kenny Pickett is. You know who the other backups are at this point. They've shown you who they are. At the end of the day, they need some fresh blood in that room to be able to kind of expand that offense and help the athletes that are already there. Um, the one thing with JT is, I know the game's going to move fast when he gets into the NFL level, but if all else fails, he can get out of a situation with his legs. And that's something that some of those other quarterbacks can do, including a veteran like Russell Wilson. But if he's able to go to Pittsburgh, I think that'd be a great pick. I know I said it in the spaces off the record, but there was a GM that told me they think he's a third-round pick. Um, the homer in me was ecstatic hearing that. I think
Yeah.
he's a fifth-round guy. As long as he gets drafted somewhere, the film is there. But
Hmm.
the leadership and tangibles, I think, is what separates him from a lot of these other guys. You see these guys at the podium interviewing, and that you don't see the moxie, you don't see the confidence. You see, it's kind of a lot for them. And all the elite quarterbacks that I know don't act in that manner, particularly with the media. Just maybe I'm just nitpicking, but these guys walk in a room, and the room adjusts to their temperature. Some of these guys don't have that, and JT's one of those guys.
Man, it makes you wonder who was in the stands in that pit game when he didn't have his receivers and he threw for what he threw. Somebody saw something. If you keep hearing pit, somebody was possibly in those stands.
Absolutely.
But but Steve, we want to say thank you, man. I really appreciate you, man, for giving your time. I thank you just for the opportunity to be able to, starting out, and you and James, especially specifically, you just thank you very much, and you even just offering yourself up as as a servant of service.
Yeah.
Even tomorrow, if we could tap in Monday, I would like,
Yeah.
Sunday we get you a rest day, man.
Yeah.
I want to watch
Yeah.
Buggy.
Monday's great.
So Monday would be good. We can do it at the same time
Yeah.
if that's possible. I would love it. Thank you very much for your time, man, and I appreciate it. And
Absolutely, man.
you have a wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of the day, man. Enjoy Naptown, man, my old city. I
See
love
you
it.
next year here, man.
See,
I'll talk to you on Monday,
yeah. Oh
buddy.
yeah. Oh, definitely. All right. I'll see you
All right,
Monday,
man.
man. Thank you
All right, bro.
very much. All
Yes, sir.
right. Well, that concludes our short as we touched in and talked with Steve Benard live from Indianapolis. Uh, we'd like to thank everyone. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to the show. We really appreciate you, and peace out.